Okay, thank you for joining us today for the Tennessee Farmers Market Vendor Bootcamp webinar series. Our topic today is food product cost and pricing tools. We're grateful to have you with us, and I'm glad to have Jared Bruin from the Center for Profitable Agriculture co-hosting this session with me. He's going to be helping me monitor the chat box. So if you would, please be sure and mute your microphone and have your video off during the session. My name is Hal Pepper. I'm a specialist with the Center for Profitable Agriculture, and we really appreciate the support that's provided by USDA Rural Development, from Tennessee Department of Agriculture and the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets to help make this series possible. As some of you know, we planned a series of Farmers Market Vendor Bootcamp workshops to present the topics that we're covering this week, and we had to cancel, though, 3 of the 6 workshops because of the coronavirus. We're glad to have the technology available to present these topics as webinars, and to help report the impact of this webinar, we're asking you to complete a very brief online evaluation of the session at the end. And the link to the evaluation will be posted in the chat box for you at the end of today's webinar. And please note that even if you have completed this evaluation earlier this week for a previous webinar, we need you to complete the evaluation after this one today also. So just a few housekeeping items. Again, please keep your microphones on mute and video off. And if you now locate the chat box, please type your name and location into the box to help us record attendance. Attendance at all 4 of the webinars this week, which were Tuesday, Wednesday, today, and tomorrow. If you attend all 4 of those, that will fulfill a Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program requirement in the agritourism, the fruit and vegetable, and the value-added producer diversification sectors. So if you want your attendance to be documented for the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, please type in your name as it appears on TDA's list. And if you join the session by phone, please let Erica Alexander at TDA know that you attended by emailing her at erica.alexander@tn.gov. You may use the chat box at any time during the session today to submit a question or make a comment, and Jared or I will be monitoring that chat box for your questions or comments. Okay, I'm recording the session and we plan to post it online, so if you want to view it later or share it with someone else, that will be available on our Center for Profitable Agriculture's website. Okay, just a mic check. Jared, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if there aren't any questions, we'll dive into our topic. You know, one of the easiest ways to go broke is to charge less for your food products than they're costing you to make them. And so we're going to look at some tools today that can help you calculate those costs. And we're going to look at how you can use some spreadsheets to help you with the pricing of those products. And we're going to look at some spreadsheets that are available to calculate the cost of using commercial kitchens. So let's say that you decide that you want to make a food product. Let's say you want to make some cookies. And I hope you'll use the chat box for this. What are the costs that you're going to have in getting those cookies manufactured and sold? What are some of the costs that you will have? You can type that into the chat box so we can see. Just asking you to think about, you know, what's involved when it comes to our costs. What would we have if we're going to make some cookies? What are the costs that we'd have? Well, we would have the cost of the ingredients, the cost of, of the actual ingredients that are going to go in the recipe. We're going to have the cost of packaging if we sell them, if we put them in any kind of package. There would be some labor costs involved in manufacturing the cookies and in packaging them. There would also be the cost of marketing, depending on where you decide to market those cookies. And there would be some administrative and some administrative costs in addition to the marketing costs. Somebody, you've got to keep up with the books. You've got to go purchase the ingredients. So there's some administrative costs too there that you want to consider. So we want to make sure that when we go to make a product, that we are charging a high enough price to cover all of those costs. So one tool that is out there is the food product cost and pricing spreadsheet. It's available at smallfoodbiz.com. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It holds 30 recipes, and the cost of it is $65. I'm sure there are other spreadsheets out there. This is one that we've noticed that is pretty easy to show you how it works. The main reason for showing it to you is that it helps us develop a template to look at what are the costs and then how we might adjust our prices to cover all of those costs. And this spreadsheet, it is available. You can use it on a PC or a Mac as long as you've got Excel on your computer. So this is what it looks like. In this case, we've put our title in here of Mama Bear's Berry Cookies. And we have said that the recipe yield in this case is 24. We can adjust the yield to a desired yield to be larger than that if we want to make more than 24 cookies. But basically, the one thing that you have to do in using this spreadsheet is you have to convert all of your measurements that are in the recipe to weight measurements. So if you've got cups of flour or you've got tablespoons of the ingredient, you're going to want to weigh each ingredient and then use that weight measurement either in ounces or in grams and put those in the spreadsheet. And the reason for that is it really makes costing out your product significantly easier. So if you go buy a 5-pound bag of flour and that's 60 ounces, we can easily figure out, if you tell me there's 2 ounces of flour in the recipe, we can easily figure out what the cost per ounce is. But if you tell me that there's 2 cups of flour in the recipe, there's not an easy way to convert those fractions of a cup in the recipe when we start looking to scale it up or look at pricing per cookie. And as you scale up your recipe, the quality is maintained if you have done this. If 1 cup, you measure out 1 cup of flour, you may have more or less air in the flour as you weigh it out. So you want to do it 1 time and then weigh it, and then that will be the standard that you'll use. You'll use the same number of ounces of flour each time in the recipe. So the first thing you'd want to do is, if you're going to use this spreadsheet, is get a kitchen scale and weigh all the ingredients that are in the recipe. And then note that you've got orange cells and you've got blue cells and a green cell there. The orange cells are the ones that you can change. as well as the blue cells that are under the heading ingredients. All the other cells are locked. They all have formulas in them, so you can't change them. But those orange cells can all be changed, as can the blue cells under the word ingredients. So as we look here, in this case, we're again saying that we have a recipe of 24 cookies, and we've put our all-purpose flour in. We've typed that into the ingredients, and note that we've put in parentheses in ounces. So we would type that in. Then we would plug in the orange cell, 400 ounces of flour costs us $13.99. And we get that from, say, a 25-pound bag of flour with 16 ounces per pound. That's 400 ounces of flour in a 25-pound bag. So if we're paying $13.99 for the bag of 400 ounces, we plug that price in, and then the spreadsheet calculates the per unit price, or the price per ounce, of 3.5 cents. And we've weighed out the number of ounces of flour that we need in the recipe, which is 5.25. And then the ingredient cost for the original recipe yield is 18.4 cents. And as we'll see in a little bit, we can change this desired yield to be a different number to make more cookies if we want to. All right, so now we have typed in all of the ingredients. We've got the sugar, the butter, the eggs, the salt, and so forth. We've typed in the number of ounces that we have for each of these, except for eggs. We've got 12 eggs in the recipe for $2.69 a dozen. So we've done this for, all of the other ingredients are in ounces, and we've got the vanilla extract in liquid ounces. So we've converted everything to what we're calling as weight measurements. Okay, so everything is in weight measurements, and our prices are listed accordingly. And then in this column under units in original recipe, we put the number of ounces and so forth down for each ingredient. And then this units required for desired yield is actually helps us if we're doing a recipe and we want to make sure that we've got enough of each ingredient on hand. We can look at this column to make sure that we do have enough of each ingredient. Okay, so then we've got our ingredient costs all over here. This is the last column, and it's showing us the ingredient cost for each ingredient for the original recipe, the 24 units. Okay, so let's assume that we want to scale up the recipe. Things have gone really good, and we decided, hey, we want to make 65 cookies instead of 24. We can go in there and in this orange cell by desired yield, plug in 65. And that is 2.71 times the original recipe yield of 24. And as you can see in this blue column here under units required for desired yield, it's increased the number of ounces of each one of these ingredients, so we can look at that and determine whether we need to go buy some more of a particular ingredient before we start making the recipe. Okay, so we've got our ingredient costs there, and if you're using this the spreadsheet, you would actually type in the name of the recipe again on this page. It's designed to where you can print out each one of these pages and put them in a notebook if you want to. So the total ingredient costs to make the 24 cookies based on the prices we've put in is $3.67. And if that makes 24 cookies, that means that our price per cookie is 15 cents. Is everybody with me so far? If you have any questions, let me know. All right, so now we want to consider the value of the time that's involved in making the cookies. So this can be either the time that you are spending to make the cookies, or how much you'd want to be paid for your time, or it could be what you're having to pay someone to do it. So we're saying that it takes 35 minutes of preparation time to make a batch of cookies, and we want to get paid $11.50 an hour for that time. So once we factor that in, now our per piece cost, or our per cookie cost, is 43 cents a cookie. We've got our ingredients cost of $3.67, and then we've got 35 minutes of time at $11.50 an hour. So now our per piece cost has increased to 43 cents per cookie. Any questions so far? Okay, all right. So the next spot on the spreadsheet is the total units in each package, the total units or items in each package. So if we want to put more than one cookie in a package, we would type in the number of cookies in that package. So in this case, we're going to sell 3 cookies in a package. So we put 3 in that cell. So now our total ingredient cost, which includes the value of the cost of the labor to prepare the recipe, is $1.30. So we have those costs so far in a package of 3 cookies, $1.30. So now we want to think about, now we want to think about the cost of packaging. And if you're selling the cookie without any packaging, obviously there's no cost to plug in here. But some of the things that we've learned from Jared earlier in the week with his sessions on marketing encourage us to think about maybe an attractive package is something that we want to consider with this product that we're marketing. Jared's wife, Lindsay, does a lot of nice things for us, and one of the things she's done is made some cookies or treats for us, and she always sends them in a really artfully designed package. So, it may be that you think, well, that's just totally unnecessary. I don't really have to put them in a package, and you don't. But if you're selling them somewhere where it's an upscale marketing outlet, then you may want to package those and consider, having something very attractive. So if that's the case, we'd want to factor that in. So we would come down on the spreadsheet to this section for the packaging. In this case, we've typed in cellophane bag, and we've also plugged in 100 bags cost $4.59. So the cost per unit, in this case, a unit is 3 cookies, but it's one package. One package is going to cost 4.6 cents. Something's going funny with my all of a sudden. So let's back up here. All right, let me stop sharing and try sharing again. Okay, so back to our example here with our packaging cost. We've got a cost per bag is 4.6 cents. We're going to use, we're going to put 3 cookies. It knows that we earlier told that 3 cookies were in a unit. And so our packaging cost for those 3 cookies is 4.6 cents. Then we've got our ribbon. We're saying that 60 inches of ribbon costs 87 cents. We're going to use 4 inches of ribbon in the package. And so that's going to be 5.8 cents per package for the ribbon. And then we're going to put a sticker or a label on it. And 100 labels cost $14.99. So that's 15 cents a piece. So we're going to have our packaging costs here of 4.6 cents for the bag, 5.8 cents for the ribbon, and 15 cents for the label. I realize we're not in presenter mode, so let me try that. Okay. All right, so now you can see that our packaging cost is 25.4 cents per unit. And we've said, hey, we want to consider the time that it takes to put them in the package and tie that ribbon together. And we've timed it and we've said, okay, it will take 3 minutes to put the cookies in the package. And if we're paying someone $9 an hour to do that, now our total packaging cost is 70 cents. That includes the time that it takes to put that packaging together. So our ingredient cost is $1.30 and our packaging cost is 70 cents. So actually, we've got $2 per unit or per package of 3 cookies in our costs. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? Okay. So now we come to another part of the spreadsheet that really gives us an opportunity to cover our administrative and our marketing costs by the margins that we would hope to get. So, you know, this is something that you can vary, that you can alter here. Those orange cells are margins that you can change. And so the administrative and the marketing costs, those are built into these margins. And so we assume that our margins are going to cover our administrative and marketing costs. So we want to make our margins as high as possible. But at the same time, we want to be thinking about, you know, if I make my margin too high, then the price that cookie might get sold at is going to be too high to sell. So we can go into this part of the spreadsheet and we can change the wholesale margin. So we said we have $2 per bag of cookies in our costs, in our ingredients and our packaging costs. So if we want to make a wholesale margin, let's say we're going to wholesale the cookies, and we want a 50% margin. So whatever price we wholesale the cookies for, then we want to keep 50% of that as our profit. So in this case, with our cost of $2, then we would be charging $4 for the wholesale price. So our profit would be $2 in that case. So, and we can go up here and we can change the private label or co-packer margin. We can change a distributor margin or a retailer margin and so on. So, you know, we can vary these things accordingly and use this to help us determine what our product costs are and then what our pricing should be based on ideal margins. Now, if we come up with too high of a retail price, then we realize, hey, we may need to do one of two things. we may need to look to see if there's some ways that we can bring our costs down, or we may need to make some revisions to the margins that we're shooting for. And that's where we can vary those as we need to. So that is how we can utilize this section of the spreadsheet. In this, whoops, I didn't mean to go that way. Okay, so I have, not sure I can back up. There we go. All right, so if we sell the cookie wholesale at $4, we've got a cost of $2 in the cookie, but we make $2 more profit on that. So that's why if we say we have a 50% wholesale margin, 50% of the wholesale price is what we would want to collect as our profit. All right. So let's assume that we're working with someone as a co-packer or private label. And in that case, we might be willing to accept a lower margin. Let's say that we want 35% of the co-packer price that we charge to be 35% of that as our profit. So in that case, our private label or co-packer price would need to be $3.08. 35% of that price would be our profit per package, or $1.08. If we're selling to distributors, we might be willing to accept an even lower percentage because we're not having to deal with any of the actual marketing costs. We're turning that over to a distributor. They're taking care of all the marketing costs that are involved in getting that product in the various outlets. In that case, we might be willing to take a 30% margin. And in that case, our price to distributors would need to be $2.80, and we would profit 80 cents, or 30% of the $2.80 price. That would be the 80 cents profit we would get because we've got $2 in the cookie and the packaging. If we pay a broker to on commission of say 5%, then in that case, our broker commission would be 5% of the wholesale price, which would be 20 cents. And our profit after the broker fees were considered would be $1.80. Okay. And then if we wanted to have a retailer margin of 40%, our suggested retail price would be $6.67. So we want to think in terms of, are these margins reasonable? Are they, what would a retailer expect? If I'm wholesaling the package of cookies for $4 to a retailer who's expecting a 40% margin, then they're going to have to charge $6.67 to accomplish their margin of 40%. There's another section here at the bottom that lets us plug in, if I want a retail price of $7.99 for that package of 3 cookies, then based on the wholesale margins that we have up here and the retail margin, then the wholesale price would be $4.79, and the product cost should be $2.40. Well, we have said earlier that our product cost is $2, and so this allows us to easily capture that retail price of $7.99. We could even back that off a little bit to still stay within our margins. and have a product cost that's no less than $2. Okay, but this is a useful tool that is out there. We're not trying to promote just this tool. Anybody could take a spreadsheet in Excel. Anybody familiar with Excel could create this themselves. But when you consider the time involved to try to create all those formulas and cells, you might figure that it's well worth the $65 if you're making a food product that you've got several components to and you want to look at it this way. It may be well worth your while.
Hal, I think we've got a couple questions in the chat box for you.
Good. Good. I'm sorry I couldn't see those, so thanks for telling me. Whoops. Let me see if I can arrow down here to the chat box. Okay. All right. So a question there is how to calculate the margin. Good question. All right. And another question, another statement was that most retail shops want 50% of retail. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about that some more. All right. So calculating the margin. So we can plug in these different margins as we want to. So we could change that to be a different number if we wanted it to be. Let's say we wanted to make it, say, 60%. If we wanted a wholesale margin of 60%, then in that case, with a $2 cost, we'd have to charge $5 for our wholesale price if we had a wholesale margin of 60%. In other words, 60% of $5 would be $3, and that would be our profit over and above the $2 cost that we have. In this case, we said we'd settle for a 50% wholesale margin. So 50% of whatever price we charge to the wholesaler, in this case, it would be $4, because 50% of that $4 is going to be our margin or our profit. And so the way we calculate that is we take the $4 and subtract the cost of the cookie and the packaging, which we said was $2, and that would leave us a profit of $2 from that $4 we received from the wholesaler. Does that make sense in calculating how we'd use that 50% wholesale margin? What we're saying is we want 50% of the price that we charge a wholesaler. We want 50% of that profit or that price to be our profit. And we could vary that private label or co-packer price as well. But in this case, we've said that, you know, we want 35% of whatever price we charge to our private labeler or co-packer. We want 35% of that final price to be ours, to be our profit. So if that's the case, if we set it at 35% and we know that we have a cost of $2, then 35% of a price of $3.08 that we have here, 35% of that would be our profit, which would really be $1.08. So if we charge the co-packer $3.08 and our cost is $2, then the $1.08 is our profit. Does that make sense? Does that help any? Okay, so I see another comment here that you would calculate the margin as price minus the cost divided by the cost times 100. So you're saying $4 minus the price of 2 divided by the cost of 2 times 100 to get 100%. Yeah, that's a different way of looking at it. And that is another way to look at it. This spreadsheet, though, is looking at it in terms of the price that you're charging, whether it be the wholesaler or the co-packer, or what you're, if you're retailing it yourself, what price you want to get out of the price that you're charging. It is a different way of looking at it. I agree. And the comment there that most retailers want 50% of retail. So that being the case, you'd want to change this estimated retailer margin to be 50% instead of 40. Let's just say that your wholesale price is $5 instead of $4. Then if they buy it for $5, and if they want a 50% retailer margin, they want 50% of that price they're going to charge, and they'd have to charge $10 to get the 50% retailer margin if they're calculating the margin the way that we've described. Any other questions, comments? Really good. Yeah, there is a difference in margin and markup. Exactly. And I think what was being mentioned in the chat box is more of a markup rather than a margin like this spreadsheet is calculating. So yeah, you do have to recognize, are you talking about a margin or a markup? So we're thinking in terms of a margin being what percentage of the price being charged do you want to keep? Or does a retailer want to keep of that price charged? Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. And we're going to talk about some spreadsheets that exist to calculate the costs of using a commercial kitchen. These are available for free. I like free, and they're out of Texas. They help you, texaslocalfood.org. They help you calculate the costs of using a commercial kitchen. Say you want to build a commercial kitchen on your farm and you want to use it to make food products. This would be a really helpful tool in that case. And after you have built that kitchen and used it, you may say, I could make some money by renting this to other folks who want to use my commercial kitchen. Maybe they have to drive, a couple or 3 hours to the nearest commercial kitchen that's available to rent. So what could I rent my commercial kitchen out for by the hour and cover my costs? Or if I want to, lease it out to someone on a long-term basis, what price do I need to get per month or per year to cover all my costs? And what does it cost to build and operate a commercial kitchen? So that's how you might use these spreadsheets. Okay, so we're going to plug in a letter, and these green cells are the ones that you can enter numbers or data into. The yellow cells are protected with those formulas in them. But in this case, you would tell the spreadsheet, what are you going to use? What kind of processing are you going to do? Are you going to do drying, or are you going to do dehydrating, or are you going to do canning, or are there some other activities? Canning or baking or drying are really, or some combination of those is what you're going to put in there. If you're going to use the facility all together for canning, you'd put canning. If you're going to do canning and baking, you'd put CB in there for canning and baking. Then you would plug in the estimated days of use per year. In this case, how many days a year are you actually going to use the facility for processing? It's not going to be 365 days a year. In this case, we've estimated, hey, we're going to use it 60 days out of 365. And we've also estimated that we're going to use it for 8 hours a day. Then we have plugged in a number for the estimated cost of the building, of the facility. So if we're having to build it, from scratch, this would include everything. Or if we've got an existing building and we need to make some renovations, modifications to it, whatever the cost of that would be, we would plug that number into this cell. In this case, we've said $40,000 for the facility. Then we would say, okay, how long do we expect that facility to last? And in this case, we've said 20 years. And how long do we expect the equipment to last? On average, 7 years. So we've actually already plugged in our equipment. We'll look at that in just a moment. But in this case, for a canning only activity, we've estimated the processing equipment would cost just a little over $29,000. So if we're using it 60 days a year, and based on the useful life that we've plugged in of 20 years for the facility and 7 years for the equipment, we come up with an overhead cost, just the cost of the facility and the equipment, of about $103 a day that it's being used. We divided the cost into those 60 days of use. And then if we divide that $103 by 8 hours in a day, that would give us an hourly cost of the overhead of $12.87. Okay, and then on the right-hand side, we have our annual costs for maintaining regulatory compliance. Our licenses, our permits, and our fees. We would plug in that number into the box there, and we've said $500. And then we've got, we take that 500, excuse me, and divide that by 60 days in a year. So that's $8.33 a day. And then we've got our utility costs that we plugged in at $1,000. And so our utility costs being $16.67 a day. So I see that we have a question here about, are you required to use a commercial kitchen? And that depends on the product that you're wanting to make. If you are allowed in Tennessee to make non-potentially hazardous products in your home kitchen or domestic kitchen, you could make the cookies that we just had in the last example. You could make those in your home kitchen, and you could sell those at the farmer's market. You can direct market those. And if it's a non-potentially hazardous product and you don't have any full-time employees, you can have part-time, but just no full-time employees, then you could sell those non-potentially hazardous products made in your home kitchen. There are some outlets, some farmers markets even, that are going to, and I see that's a comment that somebody's made, that some farmers markets require a commercial kitchen. So if that's the case, you can't make them in your home kitchen. And then if it's a potentially hazardous product, one that requires refrigeration after it's made, for example, or a salsa, or a sauce, a barbecue sauce, those kinds of things have got to be done in a commercial kitchen. Or a pickle, that's got to be done in a commercial kitchen. So yeah, there are some products that must be made in a commercial kitchen, and based on the nature of the product. And then there are some marketing outlets that require you to make it in a commercial kitchen, even if it's a non-potentially hazardous product. Any other comments on that? Okay. And we've got a publication on our Center for Profitable Agriculture website that talks about, what are non-potentially hazardous products, and what are the rules and regulations. I mentioned that You know, you can't have full-time employees, and you have to be direct marketing them. You know, you can't wholesale them, and it has to be a non-potentially hazardous product. Still got to be labeled properly, but perhaps Jerry can help me there by including the link to that publication that we have on what can be done in a home kitchen or in a commercial kitchen. All right. Any other questions or comments so far? Thank y'all for these. I really appreciate that. So I mentioned that we had to identify whether it's for canning or if it's for baking or if it's for drying or if it's for some combination of those, or if you're going to use it for all of those. Then this spreadsheet allows you to go in there and put the different pieces of equipment that you're going to have, and then identify, you know, them according to the purpose that you're going to use the. So for example, we're going to need a 3-compartment sink, and that costs $500. And you know, we would go in there and note that, hey, we've got to have that 3-compartment sink, whether we're drying or canning or baking or some combination of the above, or for all of them. So if we're going to use a piece of equipment for either, you know, for canning, baking, and drying, that would get an A in that purpose column. And if we're going to use something just for baking, for instance, the bread pans on line 17, we're only going to use those when baking, so we'd put a B in that column with the price of $250 there. There's actually, we actually input our prices in those white cells in determining and under the appropriate column for which we'll be using them. And then if there's something we use for canning, say the pH meter that we've got for $50, we put a C in that because we're not going to use that in baking or drying. Then we've got a few items down here, some dehydrator cabinets. Obviously, that's just going to be used for drying. And then we've got the costs in here for each piece of equipment. That's how we came up with the number of $29,256 for the processing equipment. That's the cost of the processing equipment for if all we're doing is canning. Okay, so if we added the columns under C for canning, that's what they would total. Okay, and I see Jared has posted the link to that publication, Changes to the Domestic Kitchen Laws Regulating Tennessee's Cottage Food Industry. Thank you so much, Jared, for doing that. Okay, and then just a few more lines that wouldn't fit on the screen. If you're doing drying and canning, you would need, say, a small meat grinder, and there's the cost of that. So you can see here under the canning column, the total cost of the equipment was $23,405. But we've also built in an estimate if we're, you know, having to pay freight on these items to get them brought in. So we've allowed 10% for the freight, and also another 15% for installation and contingencies. So once we add the numbers for freight and installation, then we come up with the total cost of the equipment here, as you can see, of $29,000 plus. And our range is anywhere from $29,256 to $46,194. That's the total, or if we're building a facility and equipping it with equipment that will allow us to do drying, canning, and baking. All right, so let's say that we're going to, we now want to look at, you know, specific costs that we have related to each type of product that we want to make. Let's say that we want to make sauerkraut, and we're gonna use our facility 20% of the time to make sauerkraut. We're also going to make cucumber relish. We're going to make pickled carrots. We're going to do squash soup. We're going to do salsa. We're going to do pickled cucumbers. And so we've allocated our percentage of the time that we're going to use the facility to make those particular items in the little green box that you see there. And one of the things I'll mention, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but you know, it's one thing to build the commercial kitchen, but you're also going to have to attend some training and you're going to need to submit that recipe to make sure that, you know, it's within the proper pH ranges, and you'll have to get approval of your commercial kitchen by Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and you're going to want to submit each recipe of each product that you're going to make and get that approved as well. And you can do that through University of Tennessee. Our food science department can assist you with getting that recipe tested and approved. Okay, so there's a question: is there a list of commercial kitchens available for farmers market vendors, or would you need to Google to find one near you? I will make a note, John, to I think I have a pretty current listing of those commercial kitchens, and I will I'll figure out, let me think here how I can do that. Don't think I can attach a document, so I may need to bring that up once we're done with the presentation and bring that up on the screen so that folks can screenshot it. Or you can also email me, and I'll be glad to send you my, so there may be an option to attach the file. Okay, well, we'll try that once we get done. All right, good. Okay, so in this case, let's say we're going to make sauerkraut, and we're going to use the cabbage that we raised on the farm, and we're going to use that cabbage in the recipe. Is there a cost associated with that cabbage? I raised it, and I'm going to use it in making sauerkraut. Do I need to consider any cost with that sauerkraut? Or would that only be the case if I were buying the cabbage from a farmer? Should I consider the cost of that cabbage? Well, yeah, you have got a cost associated with it. You've got the cost that it took to raise it. And frankly, you could sell that cabbage to customers at your farmer's market. So in this case, we have plugged in a value for the 35 pounds of cabbage that would go into making the sauerkraut. This would be our #1 cabbage. And so we've priced it at $70 for the 35 pounds, or $2 a pound. Now, we're also going to need more cabbage than that for the recipe. And we may go out and buy that, and it might be a lower quality, or it could be our own cabbage that we figure is in the recipe, and it's not quite as good as our #1 cabbage. So we could come in here in this spreadsheet and plug in $35 for the cost of that 35 pounds of cabbage, the lower quality, the inferior cabbage. Then we plugged in some numbers for salt and water. So those are our total ingredients costs that we have got per processing batch. Comes up to $108. Everybody see how I got that? I added the 70, the $2, the $1, and the $35 to get total ingredients for the sauerkraut of $108. That'll make one batch of sauerkraut. Now, we can do this for each item that we're going to make, and we would want to do that. We would have our cucumber relish. We do the same thing for that. We put in numbers for the cost of each ingredient: the carrots, the soup, the salsa, and the pickled cucumbers. So we're going to fast forward here and look at this on our, we want to plug in some other costs. As we've talked about before, we've got more than just the ingredients. We've got some costs here that we're going to pay our employees to do this. So we're assuming that we're paying an employee $15 an hour, and that we've got a 20% cost in addition to that $15 for payroll taxes and possibly some benefits that we would provide that employee. So there'd really be another $3 an hour. So we're saying that we need 3 employees and that we're going to produce 100 jars of sauerkraut per batch. We can do 5 batches in a day if we do nothing but make sauerkraut for 8 hours. And so if we're making 100 jars each time and we do 5 batches, that's 500 units per day of production. And our total packaging costs per jar, which includes the ingredients, just the packaging, just the jar and the label, would be $1.50. We have to plug that number in. We have said our jar and our label is going to cost $1.50. So our cost of goods sold per jar is that $1.50 for the jar and the label, plus our ingredients cost, that $108 divided by 100 jars. Doesn't sound exactly right. Our cost of goods sold, well, it includes the $1.50, yes. Our cost of goods sold is our ingredients of $1.08 plus the packaging cost, the jar and the label of $1.50. So our cost of goods sold, ingredients and the jar and the label, is $2.58 per jar. Does everybody understand how I got that number? My cost of goods sold is the ingredients, which was the cabbage and the salt and the water, plus the jar and the label. That's my cost of goods sold per jar, $2.58. My labor cost per day, I've got 3 employees. I'm paying them $15 an hour plus 20% for payroll taxes and benefits. So my labor cost to produce those 500 jars is 86 cents a jar. And so now when I add that 86 cents of labor to my cost of goods sold of $2.58, that total is $3.44 a jar. And if I look at it in terms of what are my cost of goods sold and my labor costs per day of production, when I made 500 jars, now that number is $1,722. Now I have to plug in a number for my average selling price. And that would be based on what you think you can retail it for, what you can sell it for at the farmer's market. And we're assuming we can sell it for $5.50, or maybe we're wholesaling it. But our average selling price is $5.50 per jar. So my gross revenue from one day's production, 500 jars at $5.50, would be $2,750. My gross margin, which would be that revenue from one day's production less my cost of goods sold and my labor cost to produce it, package it, manufacture it, my gross margin per day is $1,028. And my gross margin as a percentage of gross revenue is a little over 37%. So if I divide that gross margin of $1,028 by the revenue of $2,750, that's a 37.38% gross margin. And our gross margin for the production year would be $12,336 from making sauerkraut. I said that I was going to use the facility 20% of the time to make sauerkraut. I'm going to use it 20% of the time to make cucumber relish and pickled carrots and squash soup, and I'm going to use it 10% of the time to make salsa and to make pickled cucumbers. So I got to consider all of those, but just for the sauerkraut, the gross margin is $12,000 plus. So now I want to calculate what's my estimated annual pre-tax returns from processing. So I want to put it all together, all 5 products that I'm going to make, and I will have done that analysis that we just did for each one of those products. So once I combine all of those gross margins, which is the revenue from sales minus the cost of goods sold and the labor, the gross margins for all of it together is almost $27,000. That's what we're projecting. Then we've got our facility overhead costs per year. You remember we calculated that at the beginning. We took our cost of the facility and the cost of the equipment, and we divided it by the number of days in the year and so forth. Our facility overhead costs per year is a little over $6,000. We said that our utilities for the year would be $1,000, and our licenses would be $500. And now here's where we come in and we enter these other expenses that we would have. Here's where we would enter our marketing and promotion. And if we're paying some sales staff to maybe handle the product, or, you know, get it off the shelves and box it up and get it to the market. Any transportation or distribution costs that we're going to have. If we're wholesaling it, they're going to be minimal. If we're retailing it, they're going to be possibly more significant. We would want to consider the cost of any samples that we give away or any donations that we make, any festivals or anything like that. There'll probably be some damaged products. So we want to figure out, you know, we may break some jars. So how much of damaged product will there be that we can't sell, and what value is there to that? There'd be some supplies, some hair nets, gloves, cleaning supplies. There'd be some maintenance and repairs on the equipment. And we would want to factor in product liability insurance. The point is, don't get too caught up in these dollar amounts. They may be much lower than what you would expect. So we may need to plug in, you know, whatever your appropriate cost would be, but we just don't want to forget anything or leave anything out in this section. In this case, we've added these other expenses. They come up to $1,595. So our annual pre-tax returns would be $17,600 plus. So that is how you could use this, this spreadsheet to calculate that. All right, any questions about using that spreadsheet? Okay, so some additional resources that might be helpful to you: the National Good Food Network, Value-Added Processor Community of Practice. That's a really good group to sign up for and to get the communications, the emails on that group. People ask questions all the time, and other people respond to them, and you see the questions, you see the responses. Quite frankly, that's how I learned about these spreadsheets that I've shared with you today. I'm a member of those Google groups, and I learned about those spreadsheets on there. There's lots of helpful information on that National Good Food Network site. And then there's the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network, NPAN. If you're doing meat processing, or you're thinking about doing meat or poultry processing, that's a really good website as well. They have several webinars on there, and lots of case studies and examples that are really, really good. It's a great resource. I want to mention that tonight we're going to have a pick your own twilight question and answer discussion for operating during the COVID-19 pandemic. It will be tonight at 8 o'clock Central Time. And there is the link where you can go to register for that. And then you'll get an email with information about how to connect, how to get the Zoom link to connect with that tonight. Admittedly, we have put this together pretty quickly in response to a lot of questions that pick your own growers have about how they can do this as safely as possible. Maybe get some ideas from what other producers with pick your own operations are doing. We plan to also have one of these next week for nursery and greenhouse growers, and possibly some other topics in the coming weeks ahead. So we invite you to participate in those. And if you're on our farmers market news list, then you'll get notification about any of these sessions that are coming up. If you're not on our farmers market news list and you would like to be, if you'll give us your email, you can send it to us privately if you want to, or you can send it to everyone here in the chat box. And I'll stay online here so that I can monitor that and get that from you. If you'd like to be on our news list and you're not already, please give us your email address. And we'll be posting these on our Center for Profitable Agriculture website at ag.tennessee.edu/CPA. We'll be putting those on there early next week. So you can watch these videos and share them with someone if you'd like. Jared's mentioned that our Facebook page is going to have updates there as well. So that's really all I have for today. We appreciate everyone joining us for this. And let me see, I may have another note or two here. I think the evaluation link, Jared may have already put that in the chat box. But we hope everybody will join us tomorrow. We have one more topic left in the series. That topic's on business planning basics. And again, we appreciate you being with us, and we ask you to please complete the brief online evaluation at the link in the chat box.
Al, I did not get a chance to post that. I don't have the link on my computer. If you could type that out.
Sure, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you.
All right, and we had a question about a list of commercial kitchens. Let me see, is there another question here? How does everyone pick pricing for produce type items instead of made items? Well, it's probably not quite as complicated as what we went through, but you would want to consider what costs that you've got in the item that you're selling. So, you think about what cost you had in getting that product ready to pick and ready to market, your costs of the seed, the fertilizer, chemicals, plugs, if you're buying plugs, or if you're buying strawberry plants or what have you. There may be some costs if you're bedding bedding the product, the soil. If you're doing it in a hoop house, all of those costs will need to be considered. And of course your labor that you'd have involved in doing that, as well as the labor that you would have in any employees that you'd had in producing that product. So all of those things you'd want to consider, and then you'd want to consider the quantity that you would expect to have available to sell. And that one, you're going to have to, you want to estimate it conservatively, because in a good year, you might have quite a large quantity, but in a not so good year, your volume or quantity that you have to sell would be less, and you would divide that expected quantity by the, or the cost, you would divide those by the quantity that you'd have for sale. And that would give you a starting point. You'd also want to consider, what are other folks selling that product for? And so that competition has to be considered. Also, the willingness of your customers to buy. That might vary depending on the location where you're selling it. And also the marketing outlet that you're going to use. If you're wholesaling it or retailing it, that's going to be something to take into account. Jared, being one of our marketing specialists, he may have some comments that he'd like to offer on pricing of products that you raise.
Sure. And I posted in the chat, I said it's very similar. You can use the cookie ingredient example in a very similar way, in terms of one batch of cookies could be considered as one row of produce in your field, or maybe if you're a larger producer, 1 acre, or if you can calculate a smaller 1/10 of an acre, half acre, something like that. You still want to know all your costs, whether it is labor or all the input costs, fertilizer, time, equipment usage, anything like that would go into being spent on that acre or that row of produce. And then you'd kind of want to be able to calculate your yield, like Hal said, to get the bare minimum or your break-even price that you could charge for your produce. Once you know that, then you can look at what competitors are charging for their produce and see if that really fits. If you would have to charge a higher price than some of your competitors, then that would be where we talk about trying to find reasons to entice a customer to want to buy your product over someone else's, even though they'd be paying a higher price. Maybe you spend additional money in the type of fertilizer that you use, whether it be natural or something, or however it is, something that makes you different than your competition that would allow you to charge a higher price than they do. Would be some things to consider, and we could spend more time and talk about some of that if you'd like.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hal, did you post the survey link?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not. Let me get that. Thank you for everyone's patience. All right, so the survey link. Actually, I think I did, but I'll post it again.
It doesn't hurt to post it numerous times.
Right. All right, good. Okay, so let me see here. The chat box, I'm seeing how to do this now. All right.
So Alyssa, to your point about grass-fed beef and trying to work around the competition's pricing, that is hard to, especially to still manage a good margin. You don't necessarily have to beat every competitor's pricing. As long as you're within a decent range that you think your customers would be willing to pay over someone else's, well, regardless of what that reason may be, can still make you competitive in the market. And it's something to certainly consider. And about growing items out of your garden and wanting to sell those at a market, certainly take a look at it, run the numbers and see what it would look like, see what your expenses would be in the garden to figure that out, and then see just kind of what other competitors at the markets are selling their produce for, and see if you're in a good range with them, and if so, then it's something you should take a look at and consider to pursue. If not, maybe you rethink it, or maybe you try to focus on one or two types of produce that you can grow well, and maybe focus on those instead.
Cornell has got a really good meat pricing spreadsheet, if I can find it. Good little tool. See if I can bring it up.
Al, I think you might have posted the wrong one.
Oh no, really?
That's sources of product liability insurance.
Ah, yes, thank you. I had that on my brain. Okay. Let's try this again. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, listen, if you ever have any questions, just feel free to reach out to the center. We could talk you through some of your examples and see how we can help.
Something has happened to my ability to attach a file. I can't find the dots. Hold on here.
Everyone, Hal's only working off of one screen today, so it's very difficult trying to manage numerous different pages and make it all work on one little laptop screen. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Jared. Yeah. Okay, if you need that listing of commercial kitchens, if you'll give me your email address in the chat box, and if
Hal, do you think you could find it and send it to me, and I could drop it in there real quick?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
It might be best if you stop sharing. That way you can move around your Zoom box.
Thank you. Yeah, that's probably really what's causing the problem. All right.
You might be able to get it now if you can find your Zoom chat box.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, let me find the chat box. It's not letting me in the chat box do what I did before. Okay. In the chat box. Previously, it allowed me to attach a file from within the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, it doesn't want to now. So let me just find it and see if I can send it to you.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I'm not finding it. That's really disappointing me, but it isn't where I expected it to be. Try one more thing here. Yeah, it's going to take me a while. If folks will just give me their email address, I will send it to them.
Al, is that something we have
Actually, I think,
posted on the as a fact sheet or anything on our webpage, or no?
no, I don't think so. I do have a list of food manufacturing co-packers, but that's not a list of commercial kitchens.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mike Brown would probably have. I know he has been working on.
yeah. And Nathan, okay. No, again, that's, yeah, that's not it. Okay, I think I found it. Yeah, I got it. All right, so let me send it to you.
Okay.
And maybe you can post it. Okay, just send it to you. Oh, now I'm seeing how it lets me do it, but I'll let you post it.
Yep. Okay.
And I see there's a question about the meat pricing cuts. And I think this is, no, yeah. All right, it's the Cornell meat price and yield calculator. So let me see if I can Google that.
Mark, I think the one he's talking about right now, the Cornell meat pricing one, should be able to help you with that.
And I'm gonna post the link to that. It's a free resource. And I'm gonna paste that in here. So you'll have that.
Thanks, John. Take care.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for being with us today.